Hey everybody, my name is Amy Miller and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety birthday is January the 1st, 2003. My home group is the Came to Believe group in Rocky Mount, and we meet on Tuesday nights and Friday nights. We meet from 7 to 8. The first 3 Tuesdays we read and study out of the big book. And it takes us, I do not care what page Wood says, it takes us 2 years and 3 months, maybe 4, depending on who reads that, to go through that. I always have to clean that up wherever he goes because he says it takes 1.5 years, and it doesn't. It takes us longer. Then on the 4th Tuesday, we study the tradition that coincides with the month. We agree it does take us an entire year to go through all 12 of those. And then if there's a 5th Tuesday, which there are some, we study AA history, believing that we need to learn from our history and those things with which we don't want to repeat and those things with which we want to continue and to learn from that. And you hear my story, I never learned from my history, always with the preface, this time it'll be different, and every time it was always the same result. Friday nights were closed topic discussion with the exception of the last Friday night. We were open speaker meeting, and we have food and fellowship, world-class fellowship and food from 6 to 7, and then from 7 to 8 we have a world-class speaker. Many of you guys have been and not only have visited our home group, but have spoken in our home group. The other Friday nights, we are, the first Friday night we study the step that coincides with the month, and then the other Friday nights we pick topics out of AA literature and discuss those topics as they relate to the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous, not to the problem of the day. Yes, that was a dig. So a real funny, quick story of admission that, you guys have taught me really, really well. You guys have taught me well that I can do nothing of myself. So, and this little story it will kind of exemplify that. So I am, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Wilmington running my first half marathon. And it was one of those nostalgic things, and because that's where I was in treatment. I was in treatment at Wilmington Treatment Center when the bottom finally fell out for the last time. In 2003, I ended up in Wilmington. So I was kind of reminiscing, and I was walking around. I'd gotten there early, and I'm in this shop, and I'm looking at all the little knick-knack stuff, and I'm very intrigued by bright, shiny, colorful things. And there was this really cool serenity prayer that was sitting as I'm checking out. And it was this beautiful little plate, and it had the serenity prayer on it, and it had Wilmington at the bottom of it. And you know me, I'm like, oh, what a perfect memento to signify, my first half marathon back in Wilmington, sober, living the good life, yada, yada, yada. And so I'm like, I gotta have it. I don't care what it costs, I gotta have it. And so the guy behind the counter's like, so are you spiritual? And I was like, well, depends on the day, but I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so you know this prayer? And I'm like, yeah, I know this prayer. Only say it 1,000 times a week. He's like, so recite it. That was all I could say. I could not think of the serenity prayer. And I'm sitting there, so then I started to try to say the serenity prayer. I could not say the serenity prayer. I was like, oh my God. And he's sitting there looking at me going, yeah, you're real spiritual. Mm-hmm. Okay, buddy. And I was like, oh my God. And so I left that thing going, wow, how many times have I said the serenity prayer? Never once have I ever had a problem with it when I'm saying it with you guys. You take me out of the mix, out of the fold, and throw me out there and say it, I can't do it, I felt that was pretty profound. It taught me a big lesson too. I'm like, well, maybe I might know it. I don't know. Next time I will not qualify so heavily, but yes, I know how to say the serenity prayer. But, and I think that pretty much exemplifies my life and sums it up in a nutshell. When I live in the confines that you guys have laid out before me, my life is extraordinary. I have one of the most blessed lives. Busy, absolutely. I am on the go. My dad told me when I was born that my middle name was Go, and that pretty much sums up the way I live my life, full throttle. I love it. And you guys gave me that gift of life. My sponsor's always trying to tell me, enjoy life, Amy. Life was meant to be enjoyed. And I try to do that. And I try to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, the message that you guys gave me. Some of you have been actively involved in my life over the last 12 years. And I'm forever grateful for that, for the examples that you have set. You know, I can remember when I came back to you guys, I wanted to be, I used to sit with my sponsor and I'd watch Sarah, and a lot of y'all know her, and I'd be like, I want to be just like Sarah when I grow up. And now I'm like 10 years older than Sarah, but I wanted to be like Sarah when I grew up, you know, and just the bubble of enthusiasm and the life that she just had, and the women that were in her life, and I knew she was heavily involved in corrections, and so that's what I started doing, you know, and I set out to follow the path, and because I wanted what you had. I wanted that light that I saw. I wanted that life, that joy, and you know, when I came back to you guys, that was the furthest thing from where I was and what I was experiencing from life. So my job tonight is to try to, in a general way, tell you what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. And as a result of what my life is like today, as a result of coming in and turning my will and my life over to you guys, and allowing you to show me how to live a different way. And I grew up in Rocky Mount, or actually out in the country. I was the perfect example of an alcoholic home. My dad was an alcoholic. I can call him that because he calls himself that. In fact, he celebrated 31 years in the program this past January. I'm also an example of knowing the solution to alcoholism before I ever took my first drink. And you know, and I took that with, I'm different. I suffer from a lot of, I'm different. You just don't understand. And it's really comical to me today when my kids do that to me. And I just sit there and I smile and I say, yeah, I know you're different. You know, that really worked out well for me, but you might be different. I don't know. And you know, I think my children have been some of my biggest eye-openers for my childhood. Because when I was living my childhood, I lived it through not necessarily alcoholic eyes in the sense of an alcohol viewpoint, because I didn't start drinking until I was 14. But when I say an alcoholic, what I mean by that is that what you guys have taught me is that alcohol is but a symptom of my illness. You know, I've got to get down to the causes and the conditions. And you can look at the way that I was, how I felt and what I saw and how I viewed life before I ever started drinking, and I was a crazy, mixed up kid. I believed that I wasn't good enough. I believed that I wasn't worthy enough. I believed that I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't skinny enough. I wasn't smart enough. I just believed that I absolutely was not enough. I believed that everyone else had the answer to life's problems, and no one bothered to share them with me. I felt like everybody, you know, I'm that person that could walk in the room and there would be a table of people that would be sitting over there laughing and talking, and I knew they were talking about me. I don't know why they were talking about me, because I just walked in the room, but I knew they were talking about me. And just really consumed with self. And so I that's how I lived. My dad wasn't he was a 2/5 a day, never took a sober breath kind of alcoholic, and I didn't drink that way. And so for a really long time, he was my reason for not being an alcoholic. I am that justifier. I can justify and excuse anything. I am also a blamer. I can blame you for anything. Doesn't matter. I, hit my finger with a hammer, but it was your fault because you distracted me. I mean, you are responsible for every part of my crappy existence of life. And so that's how I was before I ever took my first drink. Now, the truth of all that matter, and it would take a sponsor and it would take a lot of step work to go back through my childhood and show me that, I'm a cheerleader. I was top 20th in my class of about 400 students. I look back at pictures and I'm like a size, 8. And what I wouldn't give to go back to that, And so the truth of all that is that I was anything other than what I thought my life was. Inside, I wanted to die. I had my first suicide attempt when I was in the 9th grade. I'm that one that if life just gets really, really bad, I'll check out. That was my solution. And so, needless to say that I had a little bit of disturbances within my mentality would be probably putting it very lightly. And so when my dad goes off to treatment, I was 14. My dad went off to treatment for 28 days. Didn't really understand why. I knew that he drank all the time. Didn't know that was causing any conflict or any chaos in the home. It was normal. That's what we did. He wasn't violent as far as being physically violent. He was just one of those real nasty, mouthy alcoholics. And what I remember is he would always tell me I wasn't good enough or I wasn't whatever. Now whether he did or not, I don't know, but that's what I heard. So he goes off to treatment, and he comes back home, and we start going to this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, my first experience with Alcoholics Anonymous was you were pretty old. I'm 14, and you were probably the age I am now, and to me, you were old. And but y'all are kind of fun, you had a little bit of a laugh about you, and you were certainly intrigued by me because, again, I came in the door. I mean, I've always lived kind of full throttle. And so I came in the door and really loud. I've always been really loud. And pretty openly, I would speak my mind. And the funny thing is that everybody would sit and they'd just smile at me and they'd laugh. And I'd be like, what are you laughing about? They were like, we're going to see you one day. And I'm like, I have not drank yet. I don't know what you think you're going to see me one day. You won't have a problem with that. And, it wouldn't take really long for that would all change. My dad, again, he was a liquor drinker, but for whatever reason, he had this belief that he wouldn't hide his liquor, but what he would do is, I grew up on a farm, is he'd stroll it all over the farm. So wherever he was, when he decided to take a drink, it was there. And for some reason, he had these tall Colt 45s, and they had been out in the barn so long they had discolored. And I found those. And instinctively, I knew the solution to that was I needed to hide them. Most normal children would take them to their mom and say, here, look what I found. No, that wasn't my solution. I hid them, and I waited for the right victim because I know that, I don't know how I knew, I guess intuitively knew, that you share this experience with another person, and I was going to become grown. I don't know why I associated drinking with grown. But I wanted that experience, and it was going to be an experience. It was something that I planned. It was something I thought about. It was something I obsessed about. Who was I going to get to be that person? And I found this victim and invited her over to the house. And we stole some of my dad's full-flavored Winston cigarettes, and we went and we locked ourselves in my room. Now, I didn't understand I didn't understand all the proper drinking things like, the preparations and of things you do and don't do before you drink. And so before we had this experience, I had a bowl of cereal. Now let me explain to you what a bowl of cereal looks like. I do everything in grandiose quantities. So I had a bowl, and a bowl is not a cereal bowl, but a mixing bowl full of cereal. And so it's like half a box of cereal and half a gallon of milk. And I loved Carolina, I still do, and it was blueberry cereal. And I don't know if y'all know what blueberry cereal is, but it's that cereal that's got the little blue marshmallows that turn you drink Carolina Blue, your milk Carolina Blue. That's what I had before I started drinking. And we went into my room, we pulled out these hot Colt 45s, and we cheered we're going to become women, and popped the top and took about two or three big pulls off of that. And what I can tell you from that experience is I painted the inside of my Carolina Blue trash can the same color as it was on the outside. The rest of that beer, I'm pretty sure, got tossed down the drain, and we left that experience going, oh my God, why would anyone drink something that tasted that god-awful? I tell you, if I've got to drink that to become whatever my diet is, you never have to worry about me sitting in your rooms because it ain't going to happen. And that lasted until I found Sun Country wine coolers. Now, I'm dating myself a little bit because if you know what that is, you're probably in your upper 40s. But anyway, so Sun Country wine coolers, that's when they started making those, and they came in 2-liter bottles. And they were tutti frutti, and I could tolerate those. And so when the magic of alcohol happened for me, and what the magic of alcohol happened, and what that looked like for me, was you constantly talked in my head. And I don't mean that in a schizophrenic manner. I'm just saying you constantly talked in my head. And you told me I wasn't good enough and I wasn't worthy enough. And what alcohol would do is it would shut you up in my head just long enough that I could be okay being in your presence. Didn't mean that I thought I was better than or worse than, just meant that I was okay being in your presence. It shut all that stuff down. It quieted my head. And when I tell you the rat ran in my head 24 hours a day. Oh my God, when I first got sober, I could not shut my head up. I'd lay down to go to sleep at night, and that thing was like the rat in the wheel. It would just go 24/7. But anyway, and that's what alcohol did for me. And I didn't start out to be a daily drinker. In fact, for a long time, I didn't daily drink. But what I can tell you is that when that happened, I drank with purpose. I drank for one reason and one reason only. Exactly what the doctor's opinion talks about it. I drank for the effect produced by alcohol. I wanted the room spinning. I wanted the lights going out. I wanted oblivion, or I wanted passing out, because I just hated the way life was. The existence of life just stunk. And if I was passed out or I was blacked out, I didn't have to tolerate it. And that's where I wanted to be. I graduated from high school. I went on and thought that a man would be my solution, so I married a Marine. And something about a man in uniform, I don't really know exactly what it is, but I do have a downfall to that. Alcohol wasn't my only stump fall, but so I married this Marine, and life was going to be different. We were going to go off and make our way. And I was 19, and I got the honor and privilege of going home and telling my mother and father that their only baby girl not only had a boyfriend, but now they had a new son-in-law. And you can imagine about how that went over. It went over really well. And, but I had this thing of I was stubborn. And it didn't matter, especially with my mother. If she told me to go left and I even wanted to go left, I would go right just to spite her. And so I would spend the next 9 months proving to her that I could handle this marriage, that she didn't know what she was talking about. Now, the first 7 months was phenomenal because he's in California and I was here. That last couple of months was a little bit of a challenge. I set off to go to Cleveland, and after about, a month, I say, I think I made a mistake, and I came running back home. And what that would do is set a precedence I would do for the next 15 years of going off really indignant with, I got this, you can't tell me what to do, I am grown. I mean, I realize you're paying my car and my insurance and my college tuition and pretty much buying everything, but I'm grown, you can't tell me what to do. And inevitably, I would crash and burn pretty quickly, and I'd run back home to mom and daddy, and they'd nurse me back to health, put me back on my feet until, and just like the traditions talk about, whoever pays the piper calls the tune. And I've gotten the honor and privilege of doing that with my children. But anyway, my mom would inevitably, she would say, because we're paying for this, you're going to do that. And it would start all over again. You can't tell me what to do, I'm grown. And this last time when I did that little stunt, my mom looked at me and she says, you know what, I don't really care if you die in the streets or you rot in prison. We are done with you. And thank God she did that. I've had a little bit of a taste of how much that had to have, just a taste of how much that had to have devastated my mother to tell me that in the last couple of years. And and I'll talk a little bit more about my mom in a little bit, but it's very humbling to have to go back and look at that and realize the pain and devastation that I had to have caused my mom. But anyway, thank God she did that. So I, the next, I don't know, that whole marriage stunt kind of made me start questioning, not necessarily that I was an alcoholic, okay? Let me get that straight. But that I might have some slight mental issues, and that maybe my dad is the responsibility party for my life being so crappy. And since he's an alcoholic, the other thing is I have the unique ability to hear what I want to hear. May not necessarily be exactly what you said, but it's what I heard you say, so it becomes my truth. And what I thought I heard somebody say that Al-Anon was about teaching me how to deal with my dad's drinking, right? So my dad's my responsibility. He's not drinking. He hadn't drank in over six years, but he's responsible for my life. So I'm going to go to this Al-Anon thing so they can teach me how to deal with my dad. Not what Al-Anon is about, absolutely is not, but it's what I heard. And so I ended up in Al-Anon. And the funny thing is I related more to y'all. I don't really understand that totally, but I do now, but I didn't then. But I went with my mom and dad to a convention, and I met him, and I fell immediately in lust with him, and him was one of y'all. And I started dating him that weekend, and at the convention, and he, again, we had this conversation. Now, what I heard him say is that, yes, I think you're an alcoholic. I think you need to come in here and tell everyone you're an alcoholic. And that is that much more time we can spend together. That's that much more we have in common. I think it would be a phenomenal idea for you to be an alcoholic. Now, what he actually said is that you might have a problem drinking. Not what I heard, but I came in and I told everybody I was drunk. He had this thing I had never heard of up until this point. It was called a sponsor. Now, by this point, I've graduated from college with a degree in mathematics, prided myself in being able to count and recognize simple numbers. His sponsor clearly had graduated from some abstract mathematical college because he told him that if I was a newcomer, that there were 13 steps up there, and if he messed with me that first year, he was violating that 13th one. Okay? So he comes to me, and we had this conversation. Again, what he actually said is that, you're coming in, you're a newcomer, you need to get settled in with the women, work the steps, develop a relationship with God. After a year, we can come back and visit and see what this is between us. Absolutely not what I heard this man say. What I heard this man say was he dumped me. And I was pretty indignantly upset with this sponsor thing for interrupting that whole groove. And there started my first resentment towards Alcoholics Anonymous because you stole my man from me. However, I was an intelligent woman. I knew that he was not the only man in here. Not all of y'all had sponsors, and the ones of you that did, some of you were listening and some of you weren't. And so that pretty much explains to you I was a 21-year-old hot mess in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am absolutely sure that there is no one in here that has a home group or has a woman that fits that qualifications in their home group. I'm sure I'm unique to that situation as well. But I can tell you I caused some havoc. And after 3 months, decided the best thing I needed to do was go work at a treatment facility. That was a smart one. After 3 months of being at the treatment facility, I decided that what I needed to do. Now, this was my best 6 months sober thinking, and I'm telling you, just as honest as I'm standing up here today, this is the reason that I did this thing. So I love movies. I love I was born a century too late because I really would have given Vivian Leigh a run for her money on Scarlett O'Hara. Absolutely would have made a phenomenal Scarlett. But at that time, my favorite movies were Top Gun, Navy SEALs, and Under Siege. Now, y'all get where I'm going with this, okay? The common thread of all three of those things is the U.S. Navy. So I think what I need to do is join the U.S. Navy, right? I'll get in shape. I'll meet Charlie Sheen. I'll meet Tom Cruise. I'll meet Steven Seagal. Life will be wonderful, right? I'll be near the ocean. Backed it up with stories in the back of the book about people that had been in all these wars and had stayed sober through the book. So surely there's meetings all over the world. I can go, it doesn't matter if I'm in Japan or if I'm in Italy, there's meetings over there. I might not can understand them, but they're over there. So certainly I can stay sober. Everybody threw me a party, wished me well, laughed at me as I'm justifying my examples, and off I went. Stayed sober through basic training, came home, and I'm a bar drinker. Absolutely love the lights, the smell, the drama, and the chaos of a bar. Went to 2 Alcoholics Anonymous meetings during the 2 weeks that I was home. One was to pick up my 9-month chip. The second one was to come back and say, you know what, y'all are making a little bit too much about that whole line in the book that talks about changing, well, actually the line's not in the book, but that whole thing, it was a big thing that they talked about changing your playmates, and playgrounds, and and all that kind of good stuff. Actually, the book talks something totally different about being around alcohol. But anyway, that wasn't what I heard. And so, y'all making a little bit too much about this, because the other part of that 2 weeks was spent at the bar with my new boyfriend, the Navy recruiter, and he was drinking. I was drinking Coke, and I'm dancing. You know, I love dancing. I love music, and y'all just making too much about all that. Now, I went to Meridian, Mississippi, and I can never tell that story without thinking about my dear friend Jim. And I went to Meridian, Mississippi, and that's when my whole life changed. My alcoholism just ignited. And I got off the plane and I met some people, and they asked me what I was doing that night. I said, they were going to the base bar, and they asked me to go. And I said, sure, why wouldn't I? You know, I had the experience of not drinking for the last 2 weeks. I got to the table. The guy asked what he'd have, and he said, I'll have a Bud Light. Now, I absolutely hated the taste of beer. I later developed a taste for Miller Lite, only because I thought it was pretty cool to drink myself. Self-centered that I am. And he asked me what I'll have, and I said, I'll have a Bud Light. And, I hated Bud. And I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't stop and think, this might not be such a good idea. I started drinking. And it was at that point my drinking turned to a daily thing. There was not a day, there was not a moment there wasn't a day that did not go by for the next 3.5 months that I was not intoxicated. I started suffering some backlash from my drinking. I started going before the captain. I started going before a lot of different things. Started passing out in stairwells, passing out in barracks I didn't belong in. Imagine that. And so a lot of chaos started happening. I did graduate top of my class, which afforded me the opportunity to pick my duty station. I'm single at this point, so I'm supposed to be going overseas, and I had some pretty amazing places I turned down. Again, this is how I picked my duty station, honest to God. I looked at it, and there was one that was stateside. It was in Coronado, California. It was SDV Team 1. I was like, SDV Team 1, what is that? They said SEAL Delivery Team 1. I said, wait a minute, SEAL as in the Navy SEALs? He said, yes. I said, thank you, God, for bringing me Charlie Sheen. That's how I ended up in Coronado, California. So I prayed to God long before y'all. I just was always setting a precedence. And so I ended up in Coronado, California, and when I got off of the plane, my college roommate was already there, and I had already corrupted her in college, so she already knew where all the bars were, and she was one I never understood. I mean, I'm the one that's passing out. She's the one always taking care of me. Pretty much would understand that today. She's not an alcoholic, and I am. But anyway, life got really crazy in California, and what I can tell you is, in a real quick, short second, is that my alcoholism went to a whole new level. A lot of different things started to intervene in my life during that point. The lights were bigger, the glam was glammier, and it was in full swing. And I met my second husband in California, and and after 3 months of dating him, we ended up getting married, and ended up getting pregnant, and ended up getting the opportunity to come home this time and tell my mother and father that not only did I have a boyfriend, but now they had a new son-in-law and they had a grandchild on the way. By this point, I'm 24. They threw their hands up and they said, you know what, you made your bed, you lay in it. Now, what I can tell you today is a little more accurate depiction and story about my second husband. For a long time, he was my reason for being the biggest, and when I say you, the biggest victim you ever laid your eyes on, that was him. It was his face. Prior to my involvement with this man, I'd never had a man. Particularly, I'd never had my dad. My dad had whipped me 3 times in my life. All 3 times I very, very distinctly remember, and I honestly earned. But I had never had a man put his hands on me out of anger, other than my brother. But brothers and dads don't count, right? my story is that for prior to my involvement with this man, if a woman were to come to me and were to tell me that her significant other or whatever was abusing her or treating her anything less than the lady that she deserved to be treated, I'd look at her with judgment, contempt, and pretty much disgust and say, don't you, and I'd start out with this preaching, don't you realize you're worth more than that? Don't you realize a man should treat you like a queen? Blah, 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 blah. How dare you let him treat your children like that? And I'd walk away kind of pretty much disgusted. And what I can tell you is that gentleman gifted me, and I do believe it today to be an absolute gift, to be able to work with women and have them tell me that story. And I look at them with love and understanding, and I say, I absolutely understand why you stood there and why you stayed and why you allowed that man to hit you and why you allowed that man to abuse your children. I did the same thing. And doesn't excuse it doesn't excuse what he did. What he did was absolutely wrong. But what I can tell you is that it would take a lot of step work, particularly that 4th step, for me to get down to where was I wrong in that relationship, to be free from that resentment. Because when I tell you that was a resentment that I came back to you guys with, I walked in, the black cloud was just, I was so full of hatred. And I justified, if you had a man that was treating you that way, you drink too. And oh God, it was horrible. But thank God I had a sponsor that taught me that the 4th part that is not written out, but is talked about in the 4th step, is about where was I wrong. It says nothing in there what was my part. Because if it implied part, would imply that you had something to do with that. And that's not what the step talks about. It talks about where was I wrong. We laid out of the minds what the other person brought to the table. Where was I wrong? And when I took away what he had done to me and I saw the truth of that, the truth was he beat me the night before we got married, and I showed up. The truth was he had been beating me for 2 months before we ever got married, and I showed up. The truth is that I had this indignant personality. If you challenged me, I was going to go to it. Didn't matter if I was right or wrong. Every argument I had to win. And it is a word, okay? It is. I mean, even if it wasn't nothing but a head shake, and I would do that. I fueled that. That's where I was wrong. That's what I brought to the table. I was the one that chose to stay. Now, when I started owning that, slowly that resentment started to go away. It would take me a long time to get to that point. Today, I'm happy to report that man is not only a part of my children's life or our children's life, but he's also a part of my life, and we can be friends today. We can legitimately sit down at a table with him and his fiancée and laugh and joke and talk about old times. And I don't sit there with hatred and resentment. That's something I did not ever plan to be able to do when I came back to you guys. He's my friend on Facebook today. Go figure for that. His fiancée is my friend on Facebook today. Go figure. And I'm grateful to that lady because she was a part of my children's life when they went to Georgia. But that wasn't my experience at that point. The 8 years that we were married was very, very volatile. The first 4 years was very volatile. I would finally, after having some intervention, would end up in a treatment facility for the first time. Would end up coming out of that treatment facility. Now, my relationship with God up until this point was such that I grew up Southern Baptist. I believed in God. I believed in Jesus. Just did not believe that either one of those two entities wanted to have anything to do with my life. I believed that I had either thought about or had broken all the commandments, knew I was going to hell, knew there was no way I could ever be lily white. I don't care how many times you dunked or sprinkled on me. I was doomed for hell. The perfectionist that I am, as I'm going to scream through the doors, rocking it the whole way. And, the church crowd that I had hung out with had judged me my whole life, so I knew God was judging me, and I was pretty much done with that. So I came back not believing in God, but just didn't believe He wanted anything to do with my life. Came out of that treatment facility. And the other thing about my twisted thinking, So I'm all about fair, right? I'm black and white. I believe everything's fair. In fact, my sponsor had to beat into me that fair is not fair and I need to get over it. But anyway, I had this mentality that's fair is fair. And I had heard about people, Moses had the burning bush, Bill had the bright light. Where's my burning bush? Where's my bright light? Where's my angel coming out of the halo, hovering over to rescue me from my crappy life? I saw none of those things, and therefore clearly God did not care about me, right? So I come out of that treatment facility, I go into Alcoholics Anonymous because they had finally convinced me that I had a problem with drinking, and I accepted that fact, and I got plugged into the program, and what I heard these people say was that meeting makers make it. That's all I heard them say. And so I'm a perfectionist that I am. I'm a meeting-making fool, right? I didn't hear anything about home group, didn't hear anything about sponsorship. All I heard is meeting makers make it. It has been my experience today that meetings are just one thing out of a whole litany of things that I do to maintain my sobriety, okay? Not what I heard. So I'm going to a lot of meetings. Had an experience the first month of my sobriety which absolutely transformed my thinking about a spiritual experience. It was no doubt a bright light. And it's one of those things that you cannot absolutely explain it. There is absolutely no explanation other than God caused it. And it was at that moment that my thought pattern on what a spiritual experience was transformed, and the fact that God did, in fact, want to have something to do with my life. Now, I wish I could tell you that was my sobriety date and I stand before you the woman I am today. That did not happen. Just like Bill's cathedral, the doggerel at Winchester, that was what it was for me. It was just a really, really cool spiritual experience. I drank again because I did exactly what the book talks about. I failed to enlarge on my spiritual life. All right, I enlarged my fellowship all day long. I'm a meeting-making fool, I even expanded my knowledge. I am that indignant alcoholic that can quote the big book to you. I could tell you every page. That was me, okay? Justified all laid out. And that lasted for 4 years. Absolutely hated my husband. He ended up coming back home. He started going to AA with me. And after a year of that, some pretty heinous events transformed in our path. And that black doom of resentment and hatred fell on me in a very, very powerful way. I'm doing a lot of step work. I'm doing a lot of talking. I was going to meetings at that time that, does anybody have a problem staying sober today? I can tell you my hand was always up. I always had a problem staying sober today. And what I would do is I throw out my problem, and then the next 50 minutes was spent trying to solve my problem. And I left there with about 500 solutions, and none of them I wanted to take. And so you can tell pretty much where that all went. And after 3 years of that, when he finally removed himself from our home, I spent the next 6 months hanging on by my teeth. And I had no relationship with a sponsor, no relationship with a home group, and no relationship with God. However, I did find a relationship with a newcomer. And that I don't say that in a joking, but that's what I did. When that newcomer relapsed, I went right out behind him. And the next 3.5 weeks were sure unadulterated hell. I did things in those 3.5 weeks that I had sat in the room and judged you for. I'll never do that. And so when I came out of whatever you want to call it, the fog, and reached out and picked up the phone on New Year's Eve of 2002 and called 911. Let me tell you, if you've never picked up the phone and called 911 and told them you're going to commit suicide, let me explain to you what's going to happen, okay? In case you ever decide you want to do it, okay? Anything and everything that has lights on it are going to show up in twos, okay? There were 2 cop cars, there was 2 sheriffs, there was 2 ambulances, there were 2 fire trucks, there was 2 of everything I think that they had in Onslow County that showed up. And I could tell you the frame of mind I was in Thank God there was not a back door to that rat-infested hotel I was in, because I'd have took off out of it running. Lady comes in and she asked if anybody called that wanted help, and I said, yeah, that's me. And what that was started would be my journey back to you guys. I ended up in 4 different treatment facilities, spent the next 90 days in treatment. I literally lost anything and everything that I owned, both mentally, physically, and materialistically, including my 2 children. Ended up coming out, I wish I could tell you I came out, got a sponsor, same for you, the woman named today. That did not happen for me. I came out of that last treatment facility, owing a lot of people a lot of money, looking at prison time, no job, no car, no nothing, but I was not going to live in a halfway house. Do you not know who I am? I am not living in a halfway house. I went and lived with my mother and father for 1 week. I said, you know what, I tell you what, we can renegotiate that halfway house, because I am now ready to go live in that halfway house. I embraced it with open arms. Pain is a great motivator for me, buddy. You let me get in some pain, I'm ready to do some work. All right, I changed. And I wish I could tell you that my life started changing at that point. It did not. I started going to the same meetings, doing the same thing, got involved with another newcomer. Can we see what a little pattern is here? And when he left me 2 weeks later for a woman with a car, that was my breaking point. And so what that little humorous joke tells me is that I cannot define what anyone's bottom looks like, because it would appear to any normal human being that almost dying, almost going to prison, losing everything that you own, both materially, financially, and monetarily, all that would be enough to catapult someone to change. Now, it was being left by a guy that I did not find very attractive, was absolutely not in love with, to a woman with a car. I said, okay, I'm ready now to do something different. And there was a woman that had always petrified me. She scared me. I'll be honest with you, And the reason she scared me is because she stood for the 36 principles Alcoholics Anonymous embodies. She carried herself in that manner. She didn't talk it, she carried herself. She's a very quiet woman. She was absolutely the most opposite person from me that has ever existed. And she'll even tell you that. I'm loud, she's quiet. I'm fast, she's slow. She even talks slow and soft. The only way I'd go over to her house, we'd start reading book study. I'd fall asleep. She's like, why are you falling asleep? I was like, it's the only time I get my brain to shut up. It's crazy. She would lull me like a little lullaby. But anyway, and I asked her to sponsor me because I wanted what she had. There was a light. She carried herself in the manner I'd always wanted to carry myself, and I didn't know how to do it. I'm that one that would sit in church on Sundays and I'd hear the preacher talk about those perfect principles. I wanted to be that good little Christian girl. I wanted to be that little girl that was whatever I was supposed to be. I just didn't know how to do it, And she started teaching me some things. She told me that my feelings were neither right nor wrong. They just were. She really didn't care about them. What she wanted to know was, what was I doing about it? She wanted to know my actions. And we started talking about actions. She said, you take certain actions based in principles and not feelings, your life will start to change. I'm like, what? So I kind of started doing some little things I just started taking some indignant little differences. I'd say, okay, I'll show you that's not going to work. I'm the example that sometimes your defects can pay off. I started going to corrections. I wish I could tell you I started going to corrections because I wanted to be like my sponsorship line. That was not why I started going to corrections. I wanted to impress a man. That's why I started doing corrections work. Thank God, God used my defects to his higher purpose. And I think that talks about what Tom always talks about, and I love his example of what a miracle is that when opportunity and preparation meet and God makes the introductions, miracles are born, And that's what happened for me. The preparation of sitting in that home group and being fed by those people that I was petrified of, that scared me. Because I didn't know, they were so foreign. Their concepts that they were trying to get me to do were so foreign from what I believed. When I would later start going into the prison and start working with those women, all that stuff just bore fruit, and it was an amazing deal. Miracles happen in my life all the time today. It's my perception of how I view things. You know, I have bright lights all the time. I still have bright lights. They're not as often as I maybe would like to have them. But the last 12 years are filled with some things that would just blow your mind. You know, just as I've sat and listened to the old timers, and I hear them talk about theirs, and you know, and those things are precious to me. You know, my life is completely nothing of what I would have told you I wanted it to be today, but it's everything I ever wanted. You know, I thought that when I came back, the idea that I could spend 24 hours or 24 minutes and not drink, I could fathom that. I had done that for 4 years. However, what I couldn't wrap my head around was being happy about that. Okay? Because at 4 years of sober, my mother and father were so concerned about my mental status that they removed my children from my care because they were afraid for them. Okay? I'm suicidal. I would, at any moment, they were petrified that I was going to kill myself and kill my children. All right? The gift that I've been given is the fact that I don't know when suicide was my answer. I mean, I can't tell you when that was. And the fact that I'm happy about life, even in the midst of storms, is a gift. It's a gift you gave me. Today I have my children, both of them. Sometimes that's questionable as to whether or not that's a happy, joyous, and free thing back in my life. But I love my children, and I'm so grateful to be able to be their mother. And being a mother today, I'm learning, is not always an easy thing. I'm starting to understand that when my mom said this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, she meant that. You know, and you know, I've been able to try to make right some of those wrongs that I created and I caused. And really quickly, I just want to wrap up around one thing that I always like to talk about today is that an amends that I'm trying to make today to my mother. And, you know, my mother, like I said, you know, it was a very hostile relationship with us for a really, really long time. And about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, my mom started acting really crazy. You know, now my mom's not the drinker. My dad's the drinker, okay? He's sober, but, you know, he's the alcoholic. My mom, she was the Al-Anon. And she started kind of acting a little bit crazy, kind of like we do when we're drinking. And I was like, is Mom drinking? And come to find out, what she suffers from was frontal temporal dementia, and which is cousin kin to Alzheimer's. And she was just really acting very bizarre. And so one of the things that my current sponsor, I have had 3 sponsors, and I love each and every one of them dearly. They've all taught me very, very significant things that I've needed to learn in my life. But my current sponsor really has taught me how to embrace my family and love them through whatever they're going through. And sometimes it's really, really difficult. And because I didn't want to be a daughter, you know. I'm not supposed to be a daughter to my mom. You know, I'm not supposed to have to take care of her. I'm not supposed to have to bathe her. I'm not supposed to have to change her diapers. I'm not supposed to have to take her to doctor's appointments. You know, I didn't sign up for this. And it took my sponsor some time to get me to a place to be able to embrace that and step up today and to be a responsible daughter and to give back to my mother and treat her the same way that she treated me 12 years ago, and take care of her and love her and realize that she's my mom. No matter what, she's my mom. And that's hard to do sometimes. It's really hard. But I'm grateful to be on the journey, and I'm grateful that you taught me those principles, and I'm grateful that you've given me the life that is beyond my most wildest dreams. Going to the international this year, I cannot wait. This will be my 3rd one. My first international, and I will wrap this up, was spent with Richard Page, and I miss that man. My 2nd one was spent with Jim Holmes, and I miss him. And the memories that I have of those internationals with those heroes, I wouldn't trade them for anything. So, I'm looking forward to this year, and I'm so grateful that you've given me my life and my sobriety. Thank you.